What the hell do you think you're doing? Ethan Ward's voice exploded through the therapy room doorway before his body even appeared. He had sprinted from the elevator, still in his suit, still clutching the phone whose camera feed had just shown him something that made his blood turn to fire. Amara Johnson froze. She was on the foam mat, her hands working along Lucas's legs, lifting, bending, guiding in a slow, practiced rhythm. The wheelchair sat pushed aside against the wall, unused. Mr. Ward, she began. Get your hands off him, Ethan barked. He strode across the room, grabbed her wrist, and yanked her back so hard she nearly lost her balance. Lucas flinched at the sudden movement, eyes wide. I saw you. Ethan snarled, breath hot, eyes blazing. Forcing him out of the damn wheelchair? Who the hell told you to do that? Who gave you permission? I wasn't forcing. Amara steadied herself. I was helping him activate the tenorist. Don't you dare explain science to me, he snapped. You're a housemaid, not a therapist, not a doctor. You do what you're told. She swallowed. He was responding. Sir, I've been watching the way he… Shut up. He jabbed a finger at her face. You don't experiment on my sons. You don't improvise. You don't touch them unless the protocol says so. Lucas whimpered. Elijah shrank into his chair, but Ethan was too far gone to notice. Rage had swallowed reason whole. He'd seen it on the camera, Amara guiding Lucas's legs while the boy sat unsupported, working muscle groups that were supposed to be lifeless. She had slid the wheelchair aside, letting his small legs dangle freely as she whispered something he couldn't hear. Ethan had watched in shock, then in fury, and now that fury poured from him with years of grief and helplessness behind it. This, he kicked the wheelchair lightly, is what doctors prescribed. This is what keeps him safe. You are what jeopardizes him. Mr. Ward, Amara said, voice trembling but steady. Your sons don't only need safety. They need… I don't care what you think they need, Ethan shouted. You think you know better than their physicians? Their specialists? My wife, God rest her soul, trusted actual professionals. Amara blinked, a flicker of hurt crossing her face. I'm not trying to replace your wife. You couldn't, even if you tried, he snapped. His words hit her like a slap. Then he added the real slap. An actual one. His palm cracked against her cheek, not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to jolt her, enough to make the boys gasp softly, enough to break something invisible in the room. Stay away from my kids, he growled. One more stunt and you're out on the street. Do you understand me? A long silence stretched, thick, electric, painful. I understand, she whispered. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed the wheelchair, repositioned Lucas stiffly, then did the same to Elijah with hands that shook with adrenaline. He forced a calm he didn't feel. Therapy is done for today, he muttered. I'll take over. Amara backed toward the door, rubbing the side of her face. I wasn't hurting them. You were hurting me, he said coldly. Get out. She left without another word. That evening, the penthouse felt unnaturally quiet. Even the hum of the city outside, sirens, distant horns, footsteps on the street seemed muted, as if the world were holding its breath. Ethan sat alone in his study, bourbon untouched, the ice melting into pale amber swirls. His reflection in the window looked older than 42. Harder. Angrier. He wasn't proud of hitting her. He didn't do things like that. His father had. Ethan swore he never would. But when he saw her holding Lucas's legs, something inside him snapped. He reached for the tablet. He shouldn't, but he did. The camera feed opened to the recording from earlier that day. He tapped play. Amara sat on the floor again, her posture soft, her presence steady. She slid Lucas carefully off the wheelchair and into her lap, bracing him just enough for support. She hummed a gospel tune, This Little Light of Mine, barely above a whisper. Lucas lifted his head toward the sound. Elijah, usually blank, distant, turned his face toward her too. She touched Lucas's knee. There you go, sweetheart. Little by little. Just try. Try. The word sliced through Ethan like a quiet accusation. He watched her lift Lucas's small leg. The boy didn't resist. In fact, it almost looked like he was helping. His foot twitched. Ethan leaned closer to the screen. Then he saw it. Lucas smiled. A real smile. Small, crooked, but unmistakably joyful. Elijah, always the quieter one, reached for her sleeve with shaky fingers, as if asking for his turn. Ethan froze. He rewound the video, played again, paused, leaned back slowly. When was the last time either of them looked like that? When was the last time he'd heard a genuine sound of happiness from them? When was the last moment in 3 years that his home held something other than routine and resignation? He pressed play a third time. There was no denying it. They were happy. And more than that, they were moving. Slightly, but unmistakably. Ethan exhaled a trembling breath and pressed his palms to his eyes. He had yelled at her, shamed her, hit her, for the one thing that had brought his son's joy. He replayed the moment he slapped her, his stomach twisting. That wasn't who he was. That wasn't who Rebecca married. He set the tablet down and stared at the ceiling. Throat tightening. What if he'd been wrong? What if the doctors were wrong? What if the world had given up on his boys, and Amara was the only one who hadn't? God, he whispered to the empty room. What have I done? Outside, the red light of the security camera blinked. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel comforted by its watching eye. He felt exposed. He closed the tablet slowly, but not before whispering a sentence he hadn't said in 3 years. I'm sorry. Raced. If you feel for these characters, hit like and comment where you're watching from. Someone near you might be watching this story too. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. It tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. A rhythmic patter that used to soothe Ethan Ward. Not anymore. Now, it was just another reminder. A sound tied forever to the night. Everything changed. He stood by the glass, staring at the Boston skyline bathed in gray. The city never stopped, never cared. People bustled down sidewalks below, umbrellas bobbing like floating dots. Cars hissed past puddles. Somewhere, horns blared in the distance. And up here, Ethan couldn't stop seeing the moment he picked up the phone in San Francisco and a voice told him his wife was gone. Mr. Ward, there's been an accident. It had been a Tuesday. Emily was driving the boys home from their preschool recital. Lucas had worn bee-wings made of cardboard and glitter. Elijah had been the sun, a paper halo crooked around his head. She'd sent Ethan a photo. He never opened it. He was on stage pitching to investors. She called once. He silenced it. She didn't leave a voicemail. The drunk driver ran a red light doing 70. The impact crushed the driver's side. The EMT told him she died instantly. The boys were alive, but barely. The hospital performed emergency surgery within the hour. The scans were clear. Spinal trauma. L1, L2. Prognosis. Unlikely to walk. Ever. Ethan didn't remember the flight home. He remembered the hospital lights, the beeping monitors, the cold plastic chairs in ICU, the doctors' voices like echoes in a tunnel. He remembered the moment he saw his wife's body. Her hand was cold in his, her face, pale, not her anymore. And he remembered the words he whispered at her grave, kneeling in the mud in the black suit he wore only once a year. I'll take care of them. I swear to God, Em, I'll take care of them. But grief doesn't care about promises. It doesn't guide you. It strangles you. That was 3 years ago. Since then, Ethan had taken care of everything except the one thing that mattered most. Now, he had just watched himself hit the woman who brought joy into his son's eyes for the first time in years. He could still feel the shape of his palm after it landed on her cheek. He hadn't hit anyone since high school, and never a woman. He rubbed his face, ashamed. The hallway outside his office was dark, quiet, too quiet. He checked the cameras again. Amara's room, the small guest quarters behind the kitchen, was dark, the bed untouched. She wasn't there. He switched feeds, therapy room empty, kitchen still. Then he found her, sitting on the floor of the boys' bedroom. She was wrapped in a knit blanket, her back against the wall. Lucas lay asleep nearby, curled toward her like a cat. Elijah clung to a small stuffed dinosaur. Amara's head was tilted slightly, as if she were somewhere between sleep and sorrow. Ethan stared. She hadn't left. After everything, after the yelling, the slap, the humiliation, she hadn't left. She'd stayed. With them. For them. A whisper scraped his throat. Why? He watched the feed for minutes, unmoving. Then he stood, He walked quietly through the house, bare feet on polished floors, until he reached the boy's door. The handle felt heavy. He turned it slowly. The room smelled like lavender and something warm, human. The nightlight glowed softly against the far wall. Amara didn't move, though her eyes opened when he stepped inside. "I didn't mean—" Ethan stopped. Words failed. Amara didn't respond. She simply looked at him, tired, guarded, but not afraid. He stepped closer. "What you did today, I overreacted. That doesn't even begin to cover it. You hit me," she said, flatly. He looked down. "Yes." End quote. The silence stretched. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added. "I'm not here for you," she replied. That stung, but he nodded. He deserved that. "I stayed because they needed me to stay," Amara continued. "They were scared. They've been scared for a long time." Ethan looked at his boys. Their soft, steady breathing. The way Lucas had curled instinctively toward her warmth. "They're responding to you," he said, voice quiet. "They're responding to being seen," she corrected. "Not as diagnoses, not as damaged, just as children." His throat tightened. "When you watch them on the cameras," she asked, "do you see who they are, or only what you're afraid they'll never be?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't know the answer. She reached down, brushing Elijah's hair from his forehead. "They need you, Mr. Ward. Not your rules. Not your fear. You." He stayed in the doorway for a long time. Then he turned and walked away. That night, he didn't sleep. He poured a glass of bourbon and left it untouched. He opened the security footage again, this time starting from the very beginning of that afternoon. Every moment, every smile, every tiny movement of muscle that once was declared dead. At 3:47 p.m., Lucas reached his foot forward half an inch, but it moved. At 3:49 p.m., Elijah laughed, quiet, breathy, but real. At 3:54 p.m., Amara whispered something while holding their hands. Ethan turned up the volume. "Lord," she murmured. "They say these boys can't, but I see them trying. And trying is where miracles begin." The words hit Ethan harder than any boardroom battle. Trying is where miracles begin. He didn't know how long he stared at the screen, but when he finally moved, the sun was starting to rise behind the clouds. He opened his email, addressed it to Dr. Leslie Kramer. Subject: New observation protocol. And then a second email, to his assistant: cancel next week's Dubai trip. No travel this month. He closed the laptop, went into the boys' room, and sat quietly in the armchair beside their beds. Lucas stirred, opened one sleepy eye, and whispered, "Daddy." Ethan leaned in, swallowed the lump in his throat. "I'm here, buddy. I'm not going anywhere." By morning, Amara was already up. Ethan found her in the kitchen, hair tied back, sleeves rolled, flipping pancakes on the griddle as if the previous day hadn't happened. The air smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. Lucas sat at the table, humming softly to himself while drawing something on a napkin. Elijah stared out the window, blinking at the rain. Neither boy was in a wheelchair. They were sitting on a large floor cushion, with their legs stretched awkwardly in front of them, unsupported, wobbly, but free. Ethan stood in the hallway, unseen, for several seconds, just watching. Amara leaned down and kissed Elijah's head gently. "You want blueberries or chocolate chips?" He didn't answer, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Both it is," she grinned, flipping a pancake. Ethan stepped into view. The moment he entered, the energy shifted. Amara didn't jump or retreat, but she did straighten up. Her expression didn't change, though her shoulders tensed slightly. Lucas looked up at his father and waved. "Hi, Daddy." "Morning, bud," Ethan said softly. He forced a smile. It felt unnatural. Amara turned off the stove and wiped her hands on a towel. They were restless. "I thought letting them sit on the floor might help stretch their hips before therapy." "No need to explain," he replied, voice neutral. A pause stretched between them. "I didn't sleep much," Ethan added. "I'm not surprised. I watched the footage." Amara nodded. And you were right." That surprised her. Her eyes flicked to his, searching for sarcasm, but found none. I'm not good at this, he said, taking a breath. I don't know how to parent through trauma. I know how to manage things, business, projects, investments. But when it comes to my sons, I've just been surviving. Trying, she corrected. His brows lifted slightly. You've been trying, Mr. Ward, she repeated. And trying is where miracles begin, remember? He chuckled dry and low, but it was a chuckle. I heard that. Amara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I didn't mean for you to. The silence turned heavy again. Ethan gestured toward the boys. Do you think they're ready for what you're doing? The movement exercises, the music, everything you're trying? I think they're ready to be believed in, she said. Even if the rest of the world gave up. Her tone was gentle, but something about her words lodged itself deep into Ethan's ribs. I spent millions, he said, not bragging, just stating a fact. Specialists from Switzerland, Japan. I've brought in robotic systems, AI therapy programs, virtual immersion simulations. Nothing moved them. Not a twitch. And I brought a gospel hymn and a picture book, she said with a soft shrug. Lucas looked up and giggled. And the choo-choo train story? That one's a favorite, she agreed, ruffling his hair. Ethan walked over and crouched beside Lucas. What's that you're drawing? Lucas held it up proudly. 2 stick figures. One was tall, with a square jaw and spiky hair. The other had a long braid and a big smile. Between them were 2 smaller stick figures, twins each, with one leg colored in blue. This is you, Lucas said, pointing. And that's Miss Mara, and me and Elijah, and we're walking. Ethan's throat tightened. Why is your leg blue? Because it's fixing, like robot legs. He smiled. That's smart. Amara was watching from the sink, expression unreadable. Ethan rose. Would you join me in the office? Just for a few minutes. Is wire down? She hesitated, then nodded. Inside the office, Ethan closed the door behind them. The city loomed in the window, but the room felt smaller than usual. Less fortress, more confessional. He motioned to the chair across from his desk. She sat. I won't pretend I can undo what happened yesterday, he began. I crossed every line. I lost control, and there's no excuse for it. Amara didn't speak. I don't want you to leave, he added. In fact, I need your help. That surprised her. Help? My sons responded to you. To your patience, your presence. Whatever it is you're doing, it's not in any manual I've read. But it's working. And I don't want to stop that. I'm not licensed, she reminded him. I know. I'm not a therapist. Still aware. I'm just exactly what they needed, he finished. Amara looked away. Ethan sat forward. I contacted Dr. Leslie Kramer. I told her to observe what you're doing. I want to formalize it. Build a new routine, one that includes you. Her brows furrowed. You trust me that much? No, he said honestly. But I trust them, and they trust you. She softened. I want to learn, Ethan said quietly. Not just what you're doing, but how to be present for them. I've been behind a wall for 3 years. I want to tear it down. Amara studied him. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said. I'm not asking you to. I just want to do right by them. Her voice wavered slightly. Then start with listening. I'm here, he replied. Not just here, she said, tapping her chest. Here. Ethan nodded. They sat in silence for a long moment before a knock came at the door. Lucas peeked in, his face peeking from behind the frame. Can Miss Mara read the train book now? He asked. Ethan looked at Amara. Only if I can listen. She smiled gently. Deal. The book was worn at the edges. Its pages had been folded, flattened, read and reread 100 times. The cover, a faded illustration of a determined little blue train hauling toys over a mountain, still held its charm, especially when Amara read it. Lucas nestled against her side, thumb tucked between his lips. Elijah sat cross-legged in his blanket cocoon, his stuffed dinosaur clutched tight. Ethan sat on the rug across from them, legs uncomfortably folded, his usual place behind a desk replaced by the floor. Amara opened the book. I think I can, she began, her voice light and sing-song. I think I can. I think I can. Lucas giggled. Elijah's eyes twinkled. Ethan listened. Not to the words he'd heard this book years ago when Emily read it on stormy nights, but to the tone, the rhythm in Amara's voice, the way she emphasized certain words, the way she waited just long enough after a sentence for the boys to absorb it. She didn't rush. She wasn't trying to finish the book. She was trying to reach them. As she read, she guided Lucas's legs slowly, gently bending one knee, then the other, mirroring the motion of the train in the story. I think I can. Ethan watched his son's face. No resistance, no flinching, just focus. For 3 years, therapy had felt like punishment for the boys, something forced upon them. But now, for the first time, it looked like play, joyful, willing. You've done this before, Ethan said softly, more to himself than anyone else. Amara paused the story. I've helped kids. Yes, not always like this. Not always with this much weight. He looked at her. You mean the injury? I mean the money. The fear. The silence around them. Ethan didn't argue. He couldn't. She continued reading. Up, up, up. Faster and faster the little engine climbed. Lucas mimicked a train whistle. Woo-woo, Elijah added, giggling. Amara grinned. See? They know the ending. When the story was done, she set the book aside, but didn't move. Neither did Ethan. The air was warm with something that hadn't existed in the Ward household for a long time. Peace. Ethan finally broke the silence. When did you first know they could move? I didn't know, Amara said. I believed. That's not very scientific, he said with a half smile. No, she admitted. But it's human. Later that day, Ethan did something unusual. He canceled all his meetings. His assistant, confused, asked if she should reschedule the Q3 planning call. No, he said. Cancel it. Indefinitely. Instead, he stayed home. He observed. He asked questions. He helped with feeding time awkwardly, spilling mashed peas on the countertop. Elijah giggled. Lucas tried to mimic him and accidentally smeared applesauce on Ethan's shirt. Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. Afterward, Amara guided them through what she called rhythmic mobility, a slow pattern of gentle stretches and timed muscle engagement. Ethan watched her closely. You're using music therapy techniques, he noted. Rhythmic entrainment, she confirmed. Not officially certified, but it helps trigger involuntary response through repetition. You taught yourself? I learned from my grandmother, she said. And from trial and error. Lucas tried to lift his foot. It trembled, hovered, then dropped. He looked disappointed. Amara reached down and cupped his cheek. It's okay. Trying is winning. Ethan felt that line sink somewhere deep. How many times had he punished himself for trying and failing, as if effort didn't matter? That night, Ethan went to his study, but didn't open his laptop. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo album. Emily's handwriting still labeled the spine. Ward Family Year 1. He flipped through the pages, tiny socks, ultrasound photos. Sleepless nights turned giggling mornings. There was one photo of him holding both twins, their heads nestled in the crook of each arm. He looked tired, pale, and happy in a way he barely remembered. He ran his thumb over Emily's smile. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have done this sooner. A knock came at the door. It was Amara. She held a thermos in one hand and a folded blanket in the other. Thought you might need something warm. He accepted it gratefully. Chamomile, she said. My grandma used to say it calms more than nerves. He gestured to the chair across from his. Sit? She hesitated, then nodded. They sat in silence for a few moments. I don't know anything about you, Ethan said finally. You know enough, she replied. He gave her a look. She took a breath. I grew up in Atlanta, South Side, raised by my mom and grandmother. Never knew my father. Did he leave? I guess. Or never showed up. Doesn't matter now. He nodded, unsure what to say. She looked at him. But I do know about your sons. I know they love music. I know Lucas likes to hum when he's happy. And Elijah always watches the corners of the room when he's nervous. I know they need time, and presence, and patience. not pressure. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. And you, she added, need to grieve properly. He looked away. Emily mattered to them. She still does. You pretending she's not a ghost in every hallway doesn't help anyone. Her words cut deep, but they were true. She was everything, Ethan said. I think I stopped being human the day she died. Amara leaned forward. Then start again. With them. He nodded slowly. When she stood to leave, Ethan said, Thank you, Amara, for staying. She gave him a look, soft but steady. I didn't stay for you. I stayed for them. He smiled. Still, thank you. After she left, he sat in silence. The rain had stopped, and for the first time in 3 years, the house felt warm again. 3 days later, the knock came at 2:11 p.m. Ethan was in the kitchen, cutting up strawberries badly while Lucas and Elijah argued over which dinosaur was stronger, the T-Rex or the Spinosaurus. Amara sat nearby on the floor cushion, stretching Elijah's legs as she casually refereed the debate. When the knock came, Ethan froze. He already knew who it was. Dr. Leslie Kramer never knocked on time. She arrived early, always wearing those charcoal slacks and that cold professional expression that could slice through walls. She didn't do small talk, or sugarcoating, or optimism. Just data. Ethan, she greeted flatly as he opened the door. We need to talk. He stepped aside, and she strode in like she owned the place. Her assistant trailed behind with a sleek laptop bag and a rolling case of equipment. Dr. Kramer took one glance at the boys sitting on the floor unsupported, legs outstretched, and froze. She turned to Ethan. Why aren't they in their chairs? They were stretching. It is 9. With who? Her gaze sharpened. Amara stood. Ah, the doctor said, folding her arms. I thought you fired the housemaid. I changed my mind, Ethan replied evenly. Dr. Kramer's lips twitched. Interesting. Is she part of your new therapy plan? She's part of my son's lives, he said. That's all you need to know. Kramer sighed. Well, let's see if the miracle healer has actually produced anything measurable. Ethan hated her tone, but he didn't argue. He followed them into the therapy room, where Amara helped the boys get settled on the padded mat. The assistants set up sensors, propped up portable EMG machines, and calibrated software. It looked more like a NASA launch than a pediatric assessment. Lucas blinked at the wires being attached to his legs. Is this going to hurt? No, Amara said softly, kneeling beside him. It's like stickers. Remember the robot legs you talked about? He nodded, calming instantly. Doctor, Kramer raised an eyebrow. You read them science fiction? Just enough to make science feel like magic, Amara said, not looking up. Ethan allowed himself a half smile. The test began. Electrical pulses gently stimulated the muscles along the boy's lower limbs, while data streamed onto the laptop screen. At first, it was the same as before. Minimal response, low tone, dead zones, then something shifted. Lucas's left quad twitched. A small ripple. Elijah's hamstring fired weakly. Inconsistently, but it fired. The assistant leaned forward. Doctor, you're seeing this, right? Dr. Kramer stepped closer, watching the live data. Repeat the stimulus, she ordered. More response. It wasn't strong. It wasn't dramatic, but it was new. Ethan stared at the screen. Dr. Kramer blinked several times, as if recalibrating herself. This wasn't present before, she said slowly. No, Ethan said, his voice barely audible. It wasn't. IMC. Any recent changes in medication, supplements? No. New therapies? He glanced at Amara. She said nothing. I authorized some modifications, Ethan replied. Dr. Kramer straightened. Well, I'll need to perform additional tests, but at first glance, this is unexpected. Hopeful? He asked, the word foreign on his tongue. She hesitated. Possibly. Boss. He wanted to demand more, but knew better. She wouldn't give him anything beyond the data. The rest, he'd have to see for himself. The testing wrapped up, the wires were removed, and the boys immediately wriggled toward Amara, who caught them in a shared hug. Elijah giggled when she kissed the top of his head. Lucas whispered something into her ear, and she nodded solemnly like she'd just been told a great secret. Dr. Kramer watched all of it. Quietly, thoughtfully. As she packed her bag, she turned to Ethan. "I'd like to adjust their official protocol," she said. "Whatever is happening, it's worth exploring." As Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You mean including what she's doing?" "I mean including what works." He nodded. "Then let's do that." When the doctor left, Ethan returned to the living room where Amara was flipping through a notebook. Her face was neutral, but he could tell she'd been holding her breath the entire time. "You heard," he said. She nodded. "I'm not celebrating. Not yet. But something happened." "Yes," she whispered. They moved. He sat down across from her. "I didn't think this would ever happen," he admitted. "Not in 3 years. Not after all the money. All the experts. I thought, if it hasn't happened by now, it won't." "I know," she said. "I buried hope," he added. Amara looked at him for a long moment. "I don't blame you for that," she said softly. "But I never buried it. Because I never had the luxury to." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Kids like yours, white, rich, born into opportunity when something tragic happens. The world rallies. But kids like me, like the ones I used to help in the South Side, nobody rallies. So we learn to fight for hope, because we have to." Ethan leaned back, absorbing that. "My boys are lucky you stayed," he said finally. She didn't respond. That night, he watched the footage again, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. The moment Elijah's muscle twitched, the way Amara whispered, "That's it, sweetheart." Just like that. The screen captured it all but somehow still didn't do it justice. Hope was growing. Quietly. Patiently. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Ward began to believe it might stay. The invitation was accidental at first. Amara had just finished cleaning up after therapy. Elijah's socks were in the laundry. Lucas had left a line of toy dinosaurs across the hallway, and Ethan was standing at the fridge, holding a takeout menu like it was a foreign script. The boys were sprawled across the living room carpet, content, quiet, and still beaming from earlier praise after their tiny muscle victories. Ethan looked over his shoulder at Amara. "You ever make spaghetti?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Spaghetti. Like, from scratch. The kind with garlic, meatballs, the whole deal." "I mean, I could," she said slowly. "But isn't that what you pay 3 chefs for?" "I fired them last week," he said casually. Amara raised an eyebrow. "All 3? They made perfect food, but my sons never touched it. And if I'm going to learn how to live again, I figured I should start with food they actually eat." She smiled, leaning against the counter. "What brought this on?" Ethan shrugged. "You said I needed to be present." This felt like a start. Amara looked at him for a beat. "You're serious about dinner?" "I am. Unless you'd rather clock out." She glanced toward the boys, who were now arguing about whether dinosaurs would have liked spaghetti. Then she turned back to Ethan. "All right then," she said. "You grab the pasta. I'll handle the sauce." To ID. They moved through the kitchen like cautious dance partners, bumping elbows, fumbling spices, and searching drawers Ethan hadn't opened in years. At one point, he reached for the oregano and spilled half the bottle across the floor. Lucas giggled from the hallway. "Daddy's bad at cooking. Thanks for the support," Ethan muttered, crouching to clean it up. "You're learning," Amara said, tossing him a dish towel. "That's more than most." 2 was. Ethan stood and looked at her, noticing the ease in her smile, the steadiness of her presence. She had a way of being fully grounded in the room without ever demanding space, like the heartbeat of the house had quietly synced to her pace. As the sauce simmered, Elijah wandered into the kitchen with his dinosaur, clutching it like a shield. Amara crouched. "Want to help me stir?" He nodded, and handed her the toy instead. She chuckled. "I guess this little guy is the chef tonight." "How so?" Ethan watched the way Elijah leaned against her, trusting her without hesitation. It wasn't something that could be taught. It was earned. By 6:30, they were seated at the dining table. The boys in booster seats, plates piled with spaghetti and meatballs, garlic bread in the center like a crown jewel. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, homemade, real. Ethan poured sparkling apple cider into small plastic cups for the boys, and a glass of red wine for himself and Amara. I feel underdressed, she joked, looking down at her sweatshirt with a tomato stain. You're fine, Ethan said, swirling his wine. Honestly, this is the first dinner that hasn't felt like a chore in years. Lucas raised his cup. To Miss Mara. Elijah mimicked, raising his dinosaur instead. Amara laughed. That's the highest honor, you know. They clinked plastic cups. The meal went slowly, not because the boys ate slowly, but because no one wanted it to end. They talked. They told stories. Ethan even managed to make a joke about his own failed cooking efforts, which got a real laugh out of both boys, and a soft smile from Amara. Then came dessert. Boxed brownies Amara had slipped into the oven while the sauce simmered. Burnt around the edges, but no one cared. Lucas licked his plate. After dinner, while Amara was wiping Elijah's face, Ethan asked, "Did you ever have meals like this growing up?" She paused. "Not often. My mom worked nights. Grandma tried when she could. Mostly it was cereal or microwave dinners. I'm sorry. Don't be." We had laughter. And stories. And gospel music every Saturday. Ethan chuckled. So that part wasn't just for the boys, huh? Nope. She grinned. That was for me, too. As she stood to take the plates, Ethan stopped her. "Leave it. I'll do the dishes." Amara raised an eyebrow. "You? Dishes? You handled therapy, lunch, dinner, dessert, and my emotional rehabilitation. Least I can do is scrub a pan." Amara laughed genuinely and sat back down. Later, after the boys were asleep, Ethan stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, steam curling from the hot water. He could hear Amara humming in the living room, folding blankets, picking up toy dinosaurs, restoring peace like a gentle tide. He dried his hands and walked into the room. She was kneeling by the couch, placing the last dino into the toy chest. "You ever feel like this is more than a job?" he asked quietly. She didn't look at him. "Every day." "Me too," he admitted. Amara stood, slowly. Their eyes met. "I don't know what this is," he said, voice low. "But I know what it's not. It's not just work anymore. And it's not just recovery." Amara looked at him for a long, long moment. "It's family," she said. And just like that, something inside Ethan softened, broke, even. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man pretending to be a father. He felt like a man trying to become one. The sun rose soft and golden through the bay windows, pouring light across the hardwood floor like a gentle promise. Ethan hadn't slept much. His mind, once a fortress of structure and steel, now felt like open terrain, scattered, unfamiliar, not chaotic, but real. He stood by the kitchen counter, stirring cream into his coffee, watching the steam curl up like smoke signals from a life he was finally willing to examine. The house was quiet except for the occasional thump of Elijah's feet against the mattress upstairs and the hum of the dishwasher, something Ethan had only recently started using himself. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Ward?" The voice on the other end was male, clipped, professional. "This is Anthony Graves. From the county records office. You'd requested a search on birth records for a Miss Amara Lynn Hill?" Ethan straightened. "Yes. Ender. Well," Graves said. "It took some digging. A lot of older files weren't digitized. But I found something interesting." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. "Her birth certificate lists no father. But," the man continued, "we cross-checked her mother's Social Security application from 1992. She listed a paternity claim, an informal affidavit." Ethan waited. The name listed was Charles Benjamin Ward. The world narrowed. "That's my father," Ethan said hoarsely. "Yes, sir. I figured as much." Was acted to do it. There was a silence so heavy it seemed to settle over the entire room. "Is there any official proof?" Ethan asked finally. "Nothing that would hold up in court," Graves replied. "But it was recorded. And more than that, your father made regular payments to her mother for over 5 years. Under a private arrangement." Ethan's throat tightened. "So it's true." I'm not here to draw conclusions, the clerk said. Only to relay the facts. Right, thank you. And well. He ended the call and stared at the countertop, his fingers tightening around the ceramic mug. Amara was his sister, half-sister, his father's daughter, and she didn't know. The man Ethan had spent his life idolizing, fearing, competing with even after death had hidden a daughter. A black daughter. In the south side of Atlanta. Quietly, deliberately. How many other secrets did he bury? Suddenly, the weight of legacy didn't feel like marble and gold. It felt like rust. Ethan sat heavily at the kitchen table, the mug forgotten. He thought back to Amara's words the night before. I never knew my father. Doesn't matter now. It mattered, not because of DNA, but because of everything it meant now. The care, the trust, the presence she had so willingly given to his sons, her nephews, and she had no idea. Amara was out in the garden with the boys, helping them pick tomatoes from the raised beds the groundskeeper had abandoned last year. Lucas giggled every time a worm wriggled near his fingers. Elijah was fascinated by the mint leaves, rubbing them between his hands and holding them up to his nose. Ethan watched from the patio for a long time before walking over. Looks like we might actually use this garden for something other than landscaping, he said. Amara smiled over her shoulder. I told them if we get enough tomatoes, we can try spaghetti again. They want to beat Daddy's sauce. Fair. It was not great. It was edible, she said diplomatically. Ethan crouched beside her. Can we talk? She immediately went still. Is something wrong? No, he said quickly. Not wrong. Just complicated. She stood slowly, brushing her hands on her jeans. All right. They walked a short distance away, to the edge of the garden where the breeze carried the scent of basil and fresh soil. I looked into something, Ethan said, voice careful. About your background. Her posture stiffened. Why? Because I had a feeling, he said. A memory. My father used to disappear for weeks. He said it was for business in Georgia. But something didn't add up. Amara folded her arms. You think we knew each other? That maybe our families crossed paths? No, he said softly. I think we're family. She froze. Ethan continued. Your mother listed his name Charles Benjamin Ward on her Social Security application. I confirmed payments he made. Quietly. For years. Amara said nothing. Ethan took a breath. You're my half-sister. She blinked. Then again, then let out a soft, stunned laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Is this some kind of guilt-driven offer to keep me around longer? No. Because if it is, it's not funny, Ethan. It's not a joke. I can show you the records. Amara stepped back. Her face was unreadable. She started, then stopped. You knew this, and didn't tell me? I found out this morning. Thee's not president. And your first thought was to investigate me? She asked, voice rising slightly. My first thought was to understand how the hell my father could abandon a child and act like she didn't exist. They both paused. The boys' laughter floated in from the garden. Amara's expression shifted. Her anger, still hot, was now mixed with something deeper, older, pain. I used to sit on the porch waiting for someone to come back, she said softly. I didn't even know who. I just believed someone would. Some kind of miracle. I guess miracles don't knock. They investigate. I didn't mean to hurt you. She looked away, arms hugging herself. Why did you even look into me? Because you felt familiar, he admitted, in a way I couldn't explain. And when you talked about your mother where you grew up, something clicked. I had to know. Amara didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, she looked him dead in the eye. So what now? Ethan swallowed. Whatever you want. You can walk away. I'll support you either way. I just thought you had the right to know. I'm not walking away, she said quietly. Not from them. Ethan nodded. And you? I don't deserve you, he said honestly. Not as family. Not even as a friend. But I want to try. If you'll let me. Amara stared at him for several seconds, then nodded once. Try, she said. But don't expect me to call you brother anytime soon. Ethan chuckled, his throat tight. Fair enough. They stood in silence again, the breeze rustling the leaves around them. Behind them, Lucas shouted, "Miss Mara, look, I got 3 tomatoes." She turned toward the sound, and in that moment, Ethan saw it. The connection that had always been there, not just in her care, but in her blood. The days that followed were quiet, but not in the way silence used to sit in the Ward estate. This quiet wasn't cold. It was full. It was the stillness of healing wounds, of long-held truths settling into the soil like seeds waiting for spring. Ethan didn't press Amara. After that morning in the garden, he gave her space. Not out of avoidance, but respect. Some truths weren't meant to be digested in a day, especially when they cracked open everything a person thought they knew about themselves. Still, she hadn't left. She showed up every morning, just like always, helping Elijah with breakfast, brushing Lucas's curls back behind his ears, organizing therapy time, music time, garden time. If anything, she became more present, but Ethan noticed it the moments when her eyes drifted. When she stared a little too long at a photo of Charles Ward in the hallway. When she flinched slightly at the sound of Ethan's voice calling her name. When the boys asked her about her family and she took just a second too long to answer. One night, as the boys slept and Amara sat in the den folding tiny socks, Ethan walked in holding a cardboard box. "What's that?" she asked, not looking up. "Something I've avoided for 20 years. She raised an eyebrow. "My father's letters," Ethan said, placing the box gently on the coffee table. Unopened, all addressed to me, all written before he died. Amara froze. Sock halfway folded. "You kept them?" "My lawyer insisted," he muttered. "I never wanted to read them. But now, maybe we both should." She hesitated. "Why now?" "Because I want to know if he ever wrote about you." Amara looked up sharply. Ethan met her gaze. "You deserve to know if you were hidden or erased." He pulled out the top envelope and opened it. The handwriting was meticulous. Charles Ward had always written like he was etching marble. "Ethan," the letter began, "I've failed you in more ways than I can count, but if I do nothing else right, let me leave you with this. Being a father is not a title. It's an action. It's how you show up when no one asks you to." Amara's breath caught. Ethan kept reading, skimming the lines. Most were typical of his father. Rational, firm, tinged with pride and regret in equal measure. But then, in the third letter, came a paragraph that stopped them both. "I made mistakes when I was younger. There was a woman, kind eyes, laughter like rain. I was weak, and I walked away. She had a daughter. I don't know if the girl knows my name. I've tried to help from a distance, quietly, cowardly. If you ever find her, Ethan, don't treat her the way I did." Silence. Amara stared at the letter like it might burn through her hands. Ethan said nothing, just handed it to her. She didn't read it again, just folded it once, placed it in her lap, and stared at her own trembling hands. "I always thought my father was some nobody who didn't want me," she said quietly. Ethan sat beside her, the couch groaning under his weight. "I used to imagine him. Create stories. That he was a soldier, a traveler, a musician, someone who'd come back when he got better. And when he didn't, I told myself it was because I wasn't worth coming back for." Her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice low. "For all of it. It's not a gata." She wiped at her eyes quickly. "You didn't do this." "No," he agreed. "But I let my father's silence become part of my legacy. I let him define how I built this house. How I parented. How I didn't show up." Amara glanced at him. "I don't want his legacy anymore," Ethan said. "I want a new one. With you, with the boys, with truth." They sat in that shared quiet for a long time, the box of letters still between them, like a grave marker finally acknowledged. Later that night, Amara tucked Elijah in and sat with Lucas, who asked, "Miss Mara, do you have any brothers or sisters?" She paused, then slowly smiled. "Yeah, baby. Turns out I do." He blinked. "Where are they?" She looked across the hallway, where Ethan was carrying a glass of water to the nightstand. "He's learning to be one," she said softly. Right down the hall. The next morning brought something new. A guest. Ethan's mother. Genevieve Ward. She hadn't visited in over a year, not since the funeral. She arrived in pearls and perfume, her driver opening the back door of a long black town car. Her hair was perfectly set. Her lips were tight. "Ethan," she greeted, eyes scanning the porch like she expected it to be cleaner. "You've lost weight." "Good morning, Mother." "And the boys?" "Thriving." Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "And who is she?" Genevieve asked, gesturing inside toward the sound of Amara's voice reading to the boys. "She's why they're thriving." Genevieve's face twisted, just slightly. "The help?" "No," Ethan said, standing taller. "Family." She blinked, unsure whether to be horrified or confused. "Excuse me?" "We'll talk inside," he said firmly. Genevieve hesitated. "You've always had a habit of making dramatic announcements, Ethan. If this is some charitable phase, it's not." He cut in. "It's truth, long overdue." Genevieve didn't move for a moment. Then, without another word, she stepped inside. And just like that, another ghost had arrived at the table. But this time, Ethan wasn't afraid of them, because this wasn't about the past anymore. It was about the family he was building, brick by brick, truth by truth. Genevieve Ward stood in the foyer like it offended her. Her eyes swept over the modern fixtures, the wooden floors she had once insisted be marble, the faint fingerprints on the glass railing. Her gaze paused when she saw the framed painting over the fireplace, a minimalist piece Emily had chosen years ago. "That should have been replaced," she said, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "It stays," Ethan replied, leading her into the sunroom. Emily loved it. Genevieve's silence was a verdict. Amara entered from the hallway, carrying a laundry basket on her hip. Her eyes met Genevieve's, and for a beat too long, the room felt frozen. Genevieve's voice broke the stillness. "You must be the young woman I've heard so much about." Amara nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am. And you're still here?" "I am." Genevieve's smile was tight. "That's unexpected." Ethan moved to stand beside Amara, not in front of her. "Mother, we need to talk." Genevieve raised a sculpted brow. "So I've been told." They settled into the sunroom, Genevieve upright in the white armchair like she was at a royal court, Ethan leaning on the edge of the windowsill, and Amara across from them, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "This isn't easy to say," Ethan began, "but it needs to be said." "Please," Genevieve said, sipping tea she hadn't asked for. "Shock me. Amara is my sister, half-sister." Genevieve blinked. Once, twice, then calmly set her teacup down. "Whose idea of a joke is this?" "No joke," Ethan said. "She's Charles Ward's daughter." Silence. Then a breath, shallow and sharp. "That's impossible," Genevieve said. "He would never." "He did. He paid her mother quietly for years. There's a paper trail." Genevieve's face hardened, but her voice stayed composed. "Your father was many things. Weak, perhaps. Ambitious to a fault. But he wasn't reckless. Keeping a daughter hidden is the definition of reckless." 21. Amara said nothing, but her hands tightened in her lap. Genevieve turned to her. "And you just arrived? Took a job in this house? Why?" Amara held her gaze. "I didn't know. I was just trying to make a living. Care for children. That's what I do." Genevieve studied her, head tilted slightly. "You have his eyes. I wouldn't know." "I do." The silence thickened. Genevieve looked at Ethan. "And what do you expect to happen now? You want to parade her around? Introduce her to the board? Acknowledge her in public?" "I want to tell the truth," Ethan said. "And destroy your father's legacy in the process?" Ethan stood fully now, jaw clenched. His legacy was built on lies, on control, on silence. If the truth ruins it, it deserves to fall. Genevieve didn't move, but her expression flickered. "You sound more like him than you think." Amara stood slowly. "Mrs. Ward, I'm not here for your blessing, or your anger. I'm not even here to claim a place. I've always had to earn my place." Genevieve looked her up and down. "And yet here you are," Amara nodded. "Yes, because your grandsons, our nephews, needed someone. And I showed up. Every day. No matter what your son thought of me. No matter what your husband hid. I showed up. Genevieve didn't respond. Whatever you believe, Amara said, voice steady. I'm not going anywhere. Always. She turned and walked out, leaving Ethan alone with his mother. Genevieve let the silence settle before whispering, "What would Emily think of all this?" Ethan flinched. "She would have welcomed her," he said, "because Emily believed in people. Not names, not appearances, people." Genevieve's mouth pressed into a thin line. "You always wanted me to be more like father," Ethan said. "But I'm not. And I never will be." Oh. He left her there, sitting in the fading sun, her pearl necklace a noose of pride around her throat. That night, thunder rolled in. The storm wasn't loud, but it was steady rain tapping against the glass like a warning. Ethan walked the halls after midnight, unable to sleep. The house had changed. Not just in its air, but in its walls. It no longer echoed with grief. It breathed. He passed the boys' room, Lucas snoring softly, Elijah cuddling his dino under the covers, and paused at the guest suite. Amara's light was still on. He knocked lightly. "Come in," she said. He opened the door to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, a book open in her lap, but unread. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "My mother. Today. Everything." Amara shrugged. She was exactly who I expected her to be. Ethan sat in the chair by the window. The rain painted shadows on the walls. "She's always measured people by pedigree," he said, "not purpose." "Well," Amara said, "good thing I'm not here to impress her." "I meant what I said, about legacy." Amara closed the book. "Then start building one." Ethan looked up. "With you?" She didn't answer right away. Then, with truth, the rain softened. The house seemed to exhale. "Do you want to be part of this family?" Ethan asked. Amara smiled faintly. "I already am." I was too arm. Outside, lightning lit up the sky. But inside, for the first time in a long time, there was no fear of storms. Only the slow, steady rewriting of everything that once was. The conference room at Ward and Lionel Holdings was a cold cathedral of glass and power. 12 leather chairs surrounded a polished mahogany table. Sunlight streamed in through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Chicago. Everything about the room, its silence, its sterility, its gleaming chrome edges, had been designed to make people feel small. Ethan Ward sat at the head of the table, unshaven but commanding, a man with truth in his pocket and fire in his chest. The board had gathered for the quarterly review, though Ethan knew this meeting wouldn't be about numbers. Not really. Not this time. Every member of the board had heard the rumors, the Maid, the scandal, the possibility of a hidden sibling, and of course the fact that Ethan had gone public with it. Just 3 days ago, an op-ed had appeared in the Tribune titled, "A Heir, a Secret, and a Legacy at Crossroads." He hadn't leaked it, but someone had. Now the whispers had teeth. Gordon Mason, the CFO and a family friend of 30 years, leaned forward first. "Ethan, before we begin, I want to address the elephant in the room." Ethan nodded slowly. You've confirmed that Amara Hill is your half-sister?" "Yes. We were gawed by that saying." "And that she's employed in your home?" "She's part of our family, and the boy's recovery wouldn't have happened without her." Several board members shifted in their seats. "You do realize the media is going to spin this as a scandal," said Margot Chu, head of international partnerships. "Hidden child. Housemaid. Inheritance implications. It writes itself." "I'm not responsible for the lies my father buried," Ethan said calmly. "But I am responsible for how I respond to them." His question, "And you're choosing to respond by giving her access to the estate?" Ethan met her eyes. "I haven't signed over anything. I've only told the truth." "That's naive," Gordon said, steepling his fingers. "The public doesn't reward honesty. They devour it." "Let them," Ethan replied. Margot narrowed her eyes. "What about the trust fund? The Ward Foundation?" "She's technically eligible for a seat on the philanthropic board." "I'm aware," Ethan said, "and if she wants it, she's earned it." Gasps flickered across the table. "You can't be serious." "She's my sister," he said. "And more than that, she's a woman who's shown more compassion, resilience, and integrity than half the people in this room." Silence. Then, quietly, from the far end of the table, a voice spoke. It was Eleanor Phelps' old, sharp, and nearly forgotten in board meetings since Charles Ward died. But today, her voice cut like a scalpel. "I knew your father better than most," she said, "and I knew the corners he cut, the pride he swallowed, the guilt he carried." All eyes turned toward her. "I knew about Amara," she said. Ethan sat back, stunned. "What?" "Not her name, not her face. But I knew he had a daughter somewhere. He told me once drunk, after your mother's birthday gala. Said he'd failed someone, said his legacy would never be clean." She looked directly at Ethan. "You think you're destroying the Ward name, but you're not. You're repairing it." The room fell into a stunned hush. Then Gordon cleared his throat. "Even so, we can't ignore the risk." Ethan stood, slowly. "The risk isn't Amara. It's us. It's continuing to pretend this company, this family, was ever perfect. It wasn't. And the only way